Hello, good day to you all. My name is Markus Söderblom. I come from a company called Cybersecurity. Funny thing just popped into my mind regarding good day. I was working in my previous, my employer was NTT.com, and it's a big company. They got lots of divisions all over the world, also lots of various time zones. And every time when you had to begin, for example, conference call, I started usually that good day, good morning, good evening, and good night for everyone. There were so many people from everywhere. Well, that's about then. Right now, I'm working in Cybersecurity. I worked there as a cybersecurity consultant. I have a background in IT for about 20 years in many different roles. I've been working in KPMG, NTT, NS, and so on. This is a quick introduction to offensive security services and their business benefits. I'm not going to go and discuss so much about the technical perspective, but instead try to focus in its business values. Few things about Cybersecurity. We are Cybersecurity, Finland's biggest provider of overall security services. We have 21 offices around Finland with approximately 350 staff members. Last year's turnover was around 60 million euros, and we serve you everywhere in Finland, and we also have customers in several other countries as well. A few things about our services. We provide cybersecurity and data network services, as well as electronic security systems, from video surveillance to access control and locking, and so on. Enough about that. Now let's move on to the real topic here. From defensive to offensive. Well, many of us are more used to defending our castle. We got our castle right here. Castle meaning our network in this case. With multiple and various layers of controls, of course. We have our typical firewalls and endpoint protection and CM, and maybe some of you got even CSOC up and running. That's all great. And of course, you got your dedicated staff and security processes in place and working. But how can you make sure that your castle's defenses are sufficient enough? Have you ever tested them? Every day in media, we hear about breaches, which took a fair amount of time to be detected. Let's see a few statistics here. Here's a bit of statistics from one particular survey regarding detection and response time from suspected incidents. It's from a Cybersecurity Insider survey from last year. A few hundred US companies were involved. It shows that it took 0 to 4 hours from 32% of the companies to detect, validate, and respond to suspected attacks. But take a look at this. 19% of the companies, it took 1 to 7 days, and from 8% of the companies, more than 14 days to detect, validate, and respond to attacks. CrowdStrike reported in its 2018, last year's global threat report, that an intruder only needs 1 hour and 58 minutes on average to jump from the one machine initially compromised and begin moving laterally through the network. 1 hour, 58 minutes. The same survey here, but what about recovering from attacks? How long does it take to recover then? 29 of the companies stated that it took minutes or hours to recover. Well, that sounds pretty good. Then again, whopping 36% told that it took between 1 day and 1 week to recover. The question is that, can you afford your company's production to be struggling or even be halted for 1 day? How about few days? Well, organizations, in my mind, should strive to meet the time objective of the 1, 10, and 60 rule. Take no more than 1 minute to detect a threat, take 10 minutes to investigate it, and 60 minutes to remediate it. How about the costs then? Just to give you an idea, here's 3 example costs of successful attacks per endpoint for small, medium, and enterprise-sized companies from last year. This is from Ponemon Institute and Barclays last year's survey, and these are, again, US companies. If you look at the numerator, the total cost there, we're basically talking about millions of bucks here, even for small companies with a headcount under 500. So far, my message is that we have now learned that detection is, unfortunately, often post-active or, at its best, real-time. But one of the fundamental values and the key points of offensive security services is the proactiveness. We all have limited security budgets and have to decide that where to invest next, especially when the basics are covered. Should you start researching, for example, CASP service providers or user and entity behavior analytics? Or where should you put your money next? Should it be offensive security services? Well, this basically means that all the basic security fundamentals needs to be already in place before thinking the next step and harnessing various offensive security services. Question to ask yourself is that, do you trust your current security posture or should it be tested? What are offensive security services? Well, there was a guy in the 90s called John Patrick from IBM. He termed the process called ethical hacking, where people were legally hired by the owners of the computers, network, or facilities to basically conduct a physical or cyber attack. Conventional security is sometimes referred to as defensive security, and it focuses on reactive measures, such as patching software and finding and fixing system vulnerabilities and so on. You know the drill. But in contrast, offensive security means, or measures are basically focused on seeking out the perpetrators and attempting to either disable or to disrupt their actions. It's basically the same methods are applied as adversaries do. Offensive cybersecurity services are rarely standardized. That's good to remember. And usually the services are being heavily customized to basically fit the customer needs. And organizations might think that they're ready for the breach, but in many cases that's not the case. You should test your security program against real-world attacks. Few common terms that when investigating what is offensive security is all about, you will most likely run into. Red team, blue team, there's various teams. Basically, what do they mean? Well, the red team is basically either internal team or a partner service provider which can be harnessed for various attack simulations, such as penetration testing, social engineering, and so on. Blue team then again consists of the conventional defenders. And during offensive security exercises, assignments, these two major players should play along nicely and learn from each other. There are actually more teams defined, such as purple team, white team, and so on, but they're not so widely known and used. When you think about acquiring offensive security services, the question which you should ask yourself is that, what objectives do you want to accomplish when simulating a real-life attack? What are the objects? Next, I'll show you a little bit that what kind of typical services are there available. Here's the first, the phishing simulation. What's the phishing simulation? What is it all about? Basically to measure and improve organization security awareness by executing phishing messages campaigns. You know, we all have those Nigerian prince letters and all those type of things. Campaigns can be executed either as a one-time or a recurring assessment. Individual phishing assessment basically is against targeted phishing attempts. That's a one scope. Recurring phishing campaigns is basically to improve the employees' overall security awareness and educate the organizations overall against various types of social attacks and vectors. What about the penetration testing then? This is a very classical thing related to offensive security services. Penetration testers' life cycle is pretty much related to the hacker life cycle. I bet you are familiar with the Lockheed Martin's cybersecurity kill chain. At least some of us are. Well, very similar steps are included in pen testers' life cycle as well. The primary goal of a penetration testing is to simulate a real-life attack on an organization. Then again, the key difference between vulnerability assessment and pen testing is that pen testing goes further, and the tester really attempts to exploit a found vulnerability. One rule of thumb: external service providers with no or minimal knowledge about the customer organization is often considered better option than a penetration testing conducted by an internal team. According to Forbes magazine from last year, an astounding 90% of the US companies don't perform regular penetration testing. Let's put that in perspective. On an average, a penetration test costs around 10,000 euros. Well, that sounds a bit expensive. Well, the average data breach, then again, cost upwards $1 million. Well, it doesn't sound too expensive now anymore, does it? How about the red team assignment then? It's similar to penetration testing, but with a higher level agenda and longer time frame. They're very similar to each other. Agenda could be, for example, to obtain access to PCI data or access to trade secrets and so on. The longer time frame basically reflects the life cycle of targeted attacks. It may reflect, for example, customers' worst case scenario. The red team will basically try to get in and access sensitive information in any way possible and as quickly as possible. This includes targeting employees and physical domains as well. So it's not just about cybersecurity. Red team assessments are also normally longer in duration than penetration testing. When penetration testing takes place over 1 to 2 weeks, red team assessment could be 3 to 4 weeks or even longer and consists usually multiple people involved. Another rule of thumb: a red team assessment is not for everyone. It should be performed by organizations with already mature enough security program. So how about red team or penetration testing then? Which one to choose? Well, both have strengths and weaknesses and are more suited to specific circumstances. You don't want to use penetration testing to judge how well your incident response team is performing. But then again, you don't want to perform a red team assessment to discover your vulnerabilities. All right, that's pretty much about it then. This was a short introduction to offensive security services and their business benefits. My name is Markus Söderblom. I'm from Virja Security, and I'd like to thank you very much for joining. We have our own Virja Security booth right over there, and I welcome you to join and discuss more. Thank you very much.